The message today is from chapter 21 of the Science of Mind text, and it is entitled Some Phases of the Subjective Life. So we're going to look at quite a few very unique, very scientific, very spiritual ideas. When we talk about the subjective life, what we are talking about is that soul aspect of life, be it individualized soul that we each have, or being at the universal soul. Both operate in a similar manner simultaneously. And we sometimes in Science of Mind call the soul the mind, and there's lowercase m mind, which means personal mind, individualized within each one of us that we are aware of, and the universal mind, God mind. It is, in us, it is the unconscious mind. We don't literally have two minds. However, we do have two aspects of mind. We have the conscious mind that we use regularly, and we have the subconscious mind, which some of us use more frequently than others. And we refer to the subconscious as personal mind or spirit, or soul. Personal mind or soul. That part of us that has direct access to all ideas that are of the one mind, the mind of God.
I don't know that I would say that I don't have two minds, because otherwise how can I change my mind?
That's two ideas.
Maybe I have one mind and I just straighten it out a little bit and say, think right. Straighten up. Ernest Holmes says that the subjective mind is the seat of memory and contains a remembrance of everything that has ever happened to the outer man. Not just ourselves, to the outer man, to all who have ever lived through time. Is that a fantastic thought, idea, that is part of our personal consciousness that we have access to? Remembrance of everything that has ever happened to the outer man. Ernest Holmes calls it the one subjective mind, or race consciousness. That's a tricky little statement, term, because it doesn't mean race in terms of race and creed or whatever. It has to do with the human race. And so we're all interconnected as one race in the human race. And so it's basically the basis of everything that we believe in Science of Mind. It's the basis to our entire system of prayer. The idea that when we treat for others or for ourselves, we don't need to actually be in anyone's direct presence. We don't have to have any physical contact with any particular person. We don't even have to be anywhere near them, because we're all part of one universal energy, the one mind, the one life, the one energy of God. And so therefore we can speak into that one energy source, and it is attached to everything else. Rupert Sheldrake talks about this in his books, and he talks about the morphogenetic fields. And there are fields around us, through us, and as us that we are a part of. And he says that our memory is not held actually in our brain. Our memories are held in that morphogenetic field, and is a part of race consciousness, basically. Einstein was aware of this idea, and he was ending his career about the time when quantum theory was coming about, and the idea of quantum entanglement. And he said, I understand it, but I can't find any mathematical way to prove it. And so therefore he wasn't totally bought into it yet. But he called it spooky science. It's something that he felt was real, but it couldn't really prove. And he did well enough proving the law of relativity. He didn't need to really go any further than that. That was basically the first step in understanding this entire idea. You know, it's more than a spiritual concept. A lot of scientists have worked on it, and we could say that it is actually even a scientific reality now. So I thought I'd look at some of the scientific background in terms of talking about the one life, the global race consciousness and the one subjective mind. There's an initiative called the Global Consciousness Project. I've talked about it in the past, but it's an international multidisciplinary collaboration of scientists and engineers. And they collect data continuously from a global network of physical random number generators. I'll talk about that in a minute. And they're located at 75 host sites around the world. And these, all these host sites send information to one hub, and they've collected 15 years of random data in parallel sequences of synchronized 200-bit trials generated every second. Now that part you don't really care about. But what's happening basically in a random number generator, it randomly chooses between 1 and 0, or 1 and 2, whatever. It just two possibilities. It's like rolling two-sided dice, and it does it really fast. And so it's going back between 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. It's completely random. Now one would think that if it's completely random, then over time it would be pretty much even, balanced out between the 1s and the 2s, the 1s and the 0s, whatever. But there are moments they find across the 75 sites around the world in which all of them start to fall into sequences, and which is all 1s or all 2s or 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 or whatever. It falls into sequences. And that's really kind of unusual in nature, that things should actually fall into sequence. And so they tried to look into why that might be. It's similar to Masaru Emoto's idea of water, crystallization of water, and when they put a jug of water in the middle and they all meditated or prayed around one particular idea or sent energy into that water of different emotions or different feelings or different ideas, that water when crystallized would show up. The crystals would form differently depending on what was put into or submitted or surrounded the water. And so these random number generators seem to respond to human consciousness. And so moments when there are great upheavals in the world, these number generators will fall into sync. And it could be a positive thing or a negative thing. Like 9/11, all of them fell into sync for about a day. All of them were in sync for a period of about a day during 9/11. There was a World Peace Day in 2021, and once again, they all fell into sync for that entire day of that Peace Day. Now, it doesn't have to be 1s or 2s, don't mean if it goes up or it goes down, it's positive or negative. It just recognizes that there is an energy, a conscious energy across the globe that is falling into sync. And it's kind of fascinating that it happens. The most recent one that they recorded was on January 6th. And the insurrection, and they found that for the entire 6 hours of that time, it was very, very pronounced, very powerful energy that was going on during that. And so they go through periods of time, they look back period of time where they feel there were moments of upheaval or great love or great expressions of unity throughout the planet, and they find that these random number generators fall into sequence every single time. It's quite fascinating. There's another research doctor, and according to decades-long research of Dr. Peter Fenwick, a highly regarded neuropsychiatrist who has been studying the human brain and consciousness, he found that the brain does not create, hold, or produce consciousness. The brain does not hold it. It's in the fields of energy around us. He says, for example, he says that the brain actually filters consciousness. It doesn't actually create it or produce it. He says, for example, the eye filters and interprets only a very small sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the ear registers only a narrow range of sonic frequencies. Similarly, according to Dr. Fenwick, the brain filters and perceives only a tiny part of the cosmos's intrinsic consciousness. He says that when the eye dies, the electromagnetic spectrum does not vanish or cease to be. It's just that the eye is no longer viable and therefore can no longer filter or be stimulated by or react to the light energy around it. But the energy it previously interacted with remains nonetheless. And likewise, when the ear dies or stops transducing sound waves, the energies that the living ear normally respond to still exist. According to Dr. Fenwick, this is also true of consciousness. Just because the organ that filters, perceives, and interprets dies, the brain, does not mean that the phenomenon itself ceases to exist. It only ceases to be in the now dead brain, but continues to exist independently of the brain and as an external property of the universe itself. You see the implications in this. The idea that there is energy around us in the universe, and we as human beings can receive it, or we cannot. We can choose to receive it, or it will happen around us and we will be oblivious of it if we choose to accept it or not. What's more, according to Dr. Fenwick, our physical human nature tricks us into perceiving a false duality of self and other, when in fact there is only unity in the universe. We are not separate from other aspects of the universe, but an integral and inextricable part of them all. And when we die, we transcend the human experience of consciousness and its illusion of duality, and merge with the universe's entire and unified property of consciousness. He says, so, ironically, only in death do we appear to be fully conscious. So we give up that part of us which assumes that we are separate from and move into the greater truth. I think it's, the last couple weeks I've been talking about different books that I've read, and so I feel like Mr. Reading Rainbow. But here's another great book, You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. You may recognize Dr. Joe Dispenza. He was in, I think he was in both What the Bleep and The Secret. And he's a quite well-known speaker. He's talking about the quantum field, the idea that quantum energy is all around us, and we choose from possibilities and they collapse into reality for us. He says, since the quantum field is an invisible field of information, its frequency beyond space and time, that all things material come from, and is made of consciousness and energy, then everything physical in the universe is unified within and connected to this field. And since all things material are made of atoms, which are connected beyond space and time, then you and I, along with all things in the universe, are connected by this field of intelligence, personal and universal, both within us and all around us, that gives life, information, energy, and consciousness to all things. Call it what you will, but this is the universal intelligence that's giving you life right now. It organizes and orchestrates the hundreds of thousands of notes in the harmonious symphony that is your physiology. Those things that are a part of your autonomic nervous system. The intelligence keeps your heart beating more than 101,000 times a day to pump more than 2 gallons of blood per minute, traveling more than 60,000 miles in each 24-hour period. As I finish reading this sentence, your body will have made 25 trillion cells. And each of the 70 trillion cells that make up your body execute somewhere between 100,000 and 6 trillion functions per second. You'll inhale 2 million liters of oxygen today, and each time you inhale, that oxygen will be distributed to every cell in your body within seconds. Do you consciously keep track of all that? When I read that, I thought, you know, sometimes it takes all my mental capacity to just decide what socks I'm going to wear today. Do you consciously keep track of all that? Or does something that has a mind so much greater than you, so much greater than your mind, and a will so much greater than your will, do it for you? That's love. In fact, that intelligence loves you so much that it loves you into life. It's the same universal mind that animates every aspect of the material universe. This invisible field of intelligence exists beyond space and time, and it's where all things material come from. including you.
You can remember all those facts to just say them.
And that's why I had the book.
I'm teasing. That was amazing. I love getting that little touch of, or big touch of science that backs everything that Ernest Holmes talks about. And I was thinking as I was listening to David that sometimes I think that because we use different words for different meanings, we get confused or we don't think we agree with someone. And I'm speaking really for myself, but I can remember so many times when I would say something and someone would say, well, that's not really true, it's more this that does that. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by this? And they would explain this to me and I'd say, okay, that's the same thing I'm saying. And they'd say, no, it's not. You said such and such a word and it's this word. So I'm going to return us to the word mind, and I'm going to offer the possibility that all the different scientists David just spoke about were talking about what I call mind, that aspect of God that is the doer. And so the idea that mind is here regardless of whether we as human beings are here or not, truly, from my perspective, is a choice. And it's a choice that we make by how we take care of ourselves in the universe. And I don't mean each of us individually, I mean collectively. Mind, or soul, being the creative medium of God, it is infinite in its power and its ability to do. Mind is the doer. I'm going to say that over and over and over, because mind is the aspect, the quality of God that does. It does not analyze anything. It cannot reject any idea that you place into it. And it doesn't even know that it's doing the doing. It just does. The thought placed into mind must materialize. Remember that other part of God, that spirit part of God, is the all-knowing part of God. It is the principle of unity back of all things. So there is the principle or the spirit that knows, and there is the law or the mind that does. And the mind of God is the doer. So as we look at subjective mind, I'm going to repeat some of the things David said, but in a different way. I want us to remember that everything that has ever happened is in the present. Knowing that the mind contains every incident, event, situation, experience, idea, all that is. The mind contains every possibility. And there is no idea outside of mind, because there is no outside of God. So every idea, everything that has come before us or is yet to be, already is present. And that's an expansive idea to capture within our own mind. And yet mentally, if we study, or maybe we don't even need to, maybe we just tap into that intuitive knowing that already knows this truth. There is something in us that feels like home, and the reason it does is because it is. It is our natural state of living. And when we mentally tap into it, we are able to understand this way of life to a point that of using it through our own personal mind. In the front of the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes dedicates one whole page to one little sentence, And this is that sentence. These lessons are dedicated to that truth which frees man from himself and women and sets him on a pathway of a new experience which enables him to see through the mist to the eternal and changeless reality. Now that sentence you could sit with for quite a while. What he's saying is that he has written this text and provided all these many lessons, these many ideas, so that each one of us can take in these ideas, play with them within ourselves, and set ourselves on a path of freedom from any and everything that is of form, of manifestation, or of our own mind, our personal mind. Because the truth is that there is only the incredible, the magnificent, the universal whole. So I'm going to take 3 ideas that spoke to me in this chapter. The first one is the idea that it is valuable to understand that each one of us has been affected by race consciousness, that idea that David spoke about, race consciousness. And we are affected by this, whether we know it or not. It is just the way humanity functions. Ideas passed down through the ages evolved themselves because of who we are, who each one of us is, the spoken and unspoken messages we received, and the atmospheres in which we live. Ernest Holmes wrote, "The combined thought of those who inhabit a nation creates a national consciousness which we speak of as the psychology of that people." He then later in the book, in this chapter, says there is a tendency on the part of all of us to reproduce the accumulated subjective experiences of the human race. And I'm going to add into there that it's not just the human race, but it's the many, many groups and associations that we make with people, with family, with friends, with co-workers. We make these mental atmospheres collectively, and we also likewise make them within ourselves. He refers to this as a mental atmosphere which we individually and collectively form. And in that, we form our beliefs. So I think it's really relevant to take a look at what ideas have come through me that I have learned that I'm still playing forward in my life that I no longer desire to experience the form of. The second one is the idea that our individual subjective mind, the unconscious, has knowledge that surpasses our objective faculties. Or, in my words, our subconscious mind has knowledge that surpasses the understanding of our conscious mind. This is so because our subconscious contains all our personal experiences, everything that came before and everything that is yet to come for us, all those ideas that we perceive and continue to play forward. It is this universal mind in which there is no time, no place, and it contains all ideas. It is this universal mind where those who use true telepathic, psychic, clairvoyant, or power of prophecy operate. We take, for example, once again, the idea of cause and effect, in which the seed which we plant in soil must already contain, in Ernest Holmes' words, the full and perfect idea of the plant as a completed thing. Else it could never have been brought into manifestation. So, the example of the seed is truly meant for us, as the seed being the idea in which we plant in mind, as which we cultivate in our daily living and thinking, and getting to a point where we see it in its full and perfect idea as a completed thing. If I am looking to demonstrate financially, I can't sit and have a pity party that I don't know where the money's coming from to pay this bill. I must sit in the abundance and plenty of life and see that bill paid as a completed thing, and see myself as one with the financial substance of all life. In the field of mind, and I know David used a lot of big scientific words, morpho something, but I'm just going to call it mind, God mind, not personal mind, but God mind, which is pure subjectivity. Both cause and effect exist at every and any given point. Therefore, possessing psychic powers means one is able to access the subjective side of life while living in the objective and conscious side of life. If you want to stay here, you don't want to make that crossover. You want to live in the conscious side while accessing that subjective side. The third idea is the idea that our human mind creates psychic laws of its own, and sometimes it does this in ignorance. Robert Merton, a sociologist, coined the term self-fulfilling prophecy, and he himself defined it as, now this is one of those backwards forwards things I know you're going to just love, and you'll probably use it again, a false definition of the situation evoking a new behavior which makes the originally false conception come true. A belief brings about consequences that cause reality to match the belief. So as soon as a negative idea comes into our awareness, and we might want to spend some time delving into that subconscious to stir up and find out what negative ideas am I still holding on to that I really do not want to carry around with me anymore. We need to turn from them and replace them with the positive idea, the truth, the qualities of God that we do choose, that we do desire. And so those were the three ideas that I found real fascinating in this part. And so just summarizing a little bit here. We are talking about the aspect of God that today that is the subjective life, the mind, the field of all possibilities. That part of life that each and every one of us has access to through our own personal mind, through the idea that I'm here, and because I'm here I can. And I can because I am. I am that. I am a drop in the ocean. I am an individuation of God, of life. I have access to the power to create the life that I love. And so it is.
So it is.